My name is Ben Fama Jr. I'm a student documentary filmmaker. I'm making a film called Virus called Fear. And briefly, I was wondering if you can give me an input on how we went from having rational fear to like not get eaten by tigers and bears, and how we came to irrational fears like politics and religion.
Okay, that's a very interesting thought.
Hey, I'm Ben. I got less than 20 minutes to talk about a program that has taken thousands of years to try to understand. That has taken the most of my adult life to understand. And it continues to spread through our system. Few of us actually ask, what is fear?
A lot of psychologists and researchers believe that fear is an innate emotion. It's believed that we are born with the ability to be afraid because it's a survival mechanism. If we did not have fear, we would not then get into a reaction to fear, which is something that is within us to survive, to be able to properly prepare ourselves for anything that's a danger.
I think fear is a survival mechanism, certainly. Fear has adaptive qualities for us over time. We needed to be afraid of things in order to survive. So the basic fears like fear of lightning, fear of fire, fear of heights, fear of danger, fear of the saber-toothed tiger, all of those were quite functional for us. And then over time, when there was not that need to be afraid of those things because we were living in more industrialized societies, we seemed to be afraid of other things, mainly other people.
Certainly, fear would be a very valuable biological mechanism because our ancestors would have lived perilous lives. They'd have been frightened of predators, lions, saber-tooths, no, probably not saber-tooths, and leopards. They would have had disease would have swooped without warning, without explanation, so they would naturally have tried to think of ways to avoid these terrible dangers. In the case of disease, which before modern science was completely unpredictable, unknowable, one would naturally fall into superstitious habits. These are superstitious responses, and when you're living in a world of ignorance.
So it's not surprising that people will go to incredible lengths to survive. If you think back to, caveman days, hearing noises, fear for your life, are you in danger of any kind, that there are fears that are actually just natural, innate, that are there to kick in the fight or flight response so that we are on guard. We're prepared for something that may be something we need to either avoid, something we need to get away from, escape from, in order to keep ourselves alive, keep ourselves safe. That type of an innate fear is going to be very different from fears that are learned.
Our survival fears, when you look at evolutionary psychology, what we needed to be afraid of in order to survive. And I can't say that that's had adaptive qualities, but a sociologist would probably say that it's been functional. It sounds a little bit odd to think that fear could be functional, but in actuality, if you look at in-groups and out-groups in society, the us versus them, it's actually quite functional to be afraid of them.
Certainly a lot of fears that it is believed are learned along the way or conditioned, depending on the school of psychology that you believe. But then there's also a lot of research to show that there are innate fears that we are born with that are there to protect us, that we need those natural reactions in order to be prepared, be on guard, and survive threats. Watson wanted to look at, could someone learn to be afraid of something? You had this young boy, this little boy, who had no fear of rats. He would sit with this white rat, he would pet him, he would play with him. There was no indication that there was any issue whatsoever. And Watson set out to create a situation where little Albert would grow to be afraid of the rat. So what he started to do was associated every time Albert went to reach for the rat, a very loud noise, so loud that it would make little Albert jump. And he kept, any time little Albert went to touch the rat, let the rat sit in his lap, for example, any kind of contact whatsoever, little Albert would hear this loud noise. And it got to the point where little Albert became afraid to go anywhere near the rat, because at that point, the virtually automatic reaction that he had learned was associating the loud, scary sound with interacting with the rat.
The attitudes that children learn in the family, that starts as soon as they begin understanding their parents. And I mean, it's not just what they say, but children pick up on facial expressions. They pick up on energy before they can even communicate. So that emotional, they can be quite sensitive to just anxiety in the air at very young ages. If you grow up in a household that is unsafe, where you feel it's not stable, not constant, not consistent, you are definitely prone to see the world as a more fearful place. If there's a lot of volatility, it goes back to another theory, Erik Erikson's theory. It's a lifelong developmental theory, but the very first psychosocial crisis is trust versus mistrust. And he theorized that it happens in the first year of life, and if you don't gain the sense of trust in your world, when you're hungry, someone's going to be there. When you're crying, someone's going to comfort you. Then you'll resolve that on the continuum of mistrust. And what that means is that that's the lens through which you're going to view your world.
So there's certainly genetic or nature aspects where you can see patterns in family, personality traits that get passed along from family to family. If you are born into a family where you see, for example, your father beating your mother, a logical part of you knows that that's not okay. So even though you know it's not okay, this is what you have learned by observation. Getting back to behavioral psychology, this is what you've learned by observation is the way I deal with my anger. And the hard part for a lot of people is, when are you taught something else?
Then if you're governed by fear, you could very well make up superstitions. Pigeons do it in Skinner boxes. Skinner himself did a very interesting experiment in which he put pigeons in a Skinner box is a cage in which if the pigeon does something like peck a key, it gets a reward, and pigeons readily learn to do that.
I will try to pick out some particular pattern of behavior and make it a more frequent part of the repertoire of the bird. Right, fine. This bird has been already conditioned to eat when the magazine sounds and the light flashes.
When it came to Skinner's work, what Skinner wanted to look at was, could you use twofold, rewards and punishments? Whereas if you introduce something positive, like to a pigeon a food pellet, it would encourage the pigeon to keep pecking at the lever to get more food, and thus would continue pecking and continue pecking. So you get a behavior to increase and continue.
It's not doing anything in particular, you see, but I'm going to try to get it to do something. Suppose I shape up the behavior of making a complete turn.
If he came back after a few hours and saw half a dozen pigeons under this regime, one pigeon would be preening under its left wing, another would be turning round in circles, another would be scratching the ground.